She thought she was coming home from a quiet 2-week trip to Charleston. Instead, Evelyn Carter stepped out of a yellow taxi and found strangers carrying her life out through the front door. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across Maplewood Drive as the taxi rolled to a stop in front of the pale blue colonial house Evelyn had lived in for almost 38 years. A massive moving truck sat crooked along the curb, its back doors wide open like the mouth of some giant machine swallowing memories whole. 2 men in gray uniforms carried out her dining room chairs while another wrapped framed family photos in brown packing paper. For a moment, Evelyn simply stared through the taxi window, unable to process what she was seeing. Her fingers tightened slowly around the leather strap of her purse. "Ma'am?" the driver asked gently. "You okay?" Evelyn blinked hard and forced a faint smile. I think there must be some mistake." But deep down, something cold had already begun settling in her chest. She stepped out carefully onto the driveway, her sneakers crunching softly against scattered gravel. The humid August air smelled like cut grass and cardboard dust. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson stood frozen beside her mailbox, pretending not to stare. Another neighbor quickly looked away when their eyes met. Evelyn's heartbeat slowed into something strangely quiet. Too quiet. Then she saw it. Her late husband's old recliner being dragged toward the truck. The same brown leather chair Robert had fallen asleep in almost every Sunday afternoon before cancer hollowed him down to skin and bones. One of the movers bumped it carelessly against the porch railing. Evelyn instinctively took a step forward. "Please be careful with that," she said softly. The mover paused awkwardly. Sorry, Mom." Before she could ask another question, the front door opened again. Her son Jason stepped outside holding a clipboard in one hand and his phone in the other. He froze when he saw her standing there. For half a second, guilt flashed across his face. Then it disappeared beneath forced calm. "Mom," he said carefully. "You're back early." Evelyn looked at him without speaking. Jason adjusted the collar of his expensive polo shirt and glanced nervously toward the neighbors watching from their windows. "We were gonna call you tonight," he added quickly. Things just moved faster than expected. Behind him, Melissa appeared in the doorway carrying a cardboard box labeled Master Bedroom. Her blonde ponytail swung as she stopped short at the sight of Evelyn standing in the driveway. The silence between them thickened instantly. And then came the voice that shattered what remained of Evelyn's world. Little Noah stepped out behind his mother holding a stuffed dinosaur. "Dad said Grandma won't live here anymore," he said innocently. The street went completely silent. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, like a house losing heat in winter. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom, we already packed most of your things." Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A lawnmower hummed faintly in the distance. Ordinary suburban sounds continued as if nothing sacred was being destroyed in front of her. Evelyn looked past her son into the house. The walls were bare. The family portraits were gone. Even the hallway table Robert built by hand 30 years ago had vanished. The home she had sacrificed her entire adult life to protect suddenly looked like it belonged to strangers. And standing there beneath the fading sunlight, Evelyn Carter realized something that hurt far more than betrayal itself. They hadn't just planned to move her out. They had planned to erase her. Evelyn stood motionless in the driveway while another box disappeared into the moving truck. The cardboard flaps trembled slightly in the warm breeze, and for some reason that tiny movement hurt more than anything else. It made everything feel final. Jason cleared his throat and stepped toward her with the careful expression of a man rehearsing words he already knew sounded terrible. "Mom, why do not we go inside and talk?" he asked quietly. Evelyn looked at him for several seconds before nodding once. She moved slowly toward the porch steps, passing the movers without a word. One of them lowered his eyes respectfully as she walked by. Inside, the house smelled unfamiliar now. Dust hung in the air where furniture had been removed, and the living room echoed with a hollow emptiness that made every footstep sound wrong. The pale outlines of missing photographs marked the walls like ghosts. Evelyn stopped near the staircase when she noticed the grandfather clock was gone. Robert had bought that clock during their 10th wedding anniversary trip to Vermont. Jason used to hide behind it as a little boy during hide-and-seek games. "Where is the clock?" she asked softly. Melissa appeared near the kitchen entrance, folding her arms. A dealer already picked it up yesterday, she answered before Jason could speak. Evelyn turned slowly toward her. You sold it. Melissa shifted uncomfortably beneath the older woman's calm gaze. Well, technically, yes. It did not really fit the new design anyway. The words landed like ice water. New design. Evelyn glanced around the room and noticed details she had missed before. The floral curtains she picked out 15 years ago were gone. Fresh white curtains hung in their place. The antique lamp beside the couch had vanished too. Even the family photos above the fireplace were missing. Jason stepped forward quickly. Mom, listen. We were trying to make things easier for everybody. Evelyn looked at him quietly. By removing my things while I was out of town? Jason sighed heavily. You were never supposed to walk into it like this. Melissa let out a small breath through her nose. Jason, just tell her. Evelyn noticed the irritation in her daughter-in-law's voice. Not guilt. Irritation. As if this entire situation had become inconvenient for her. Jason rubbed his temples. The house is too much for you now, Mom. It has stairs everywhere. The maintenance alone is exhausting. We have been talking about it for months. You have been talking about it, Evelyn corrected gently. The kitchen fell silent. Noah wandered into the room clutching his dinosaur toy, completely unaware of the tension pressing against the walls. Mommy said my new room is going to be upstairs, he announced happily. Evelyn's eyes lifted toward the staircase. Her bedroom. Melissa smiled. Tightly. The baby is coming in December. We needed the extra space. There it was at last. The real reason. Not concern. Not practicality. Space. Evelyn felt something deep inside her chest begin to crack, though her face remained calm. So you decided I should leave. Jason's expression hardened slightly, as though he had finally grown tired of pretending this was a discussion. Mom, you are 62 years old. You should not be living alone in a house this size anymore. I have lived here since before you learned how to tie your shoes. And we appreciate everything you did. Melissa cut in quickly, her voice carrying that polished sweetness that somehow made every sentence feel colder. But this arrangement makes more sense now. We already found you a beautiful senior apartment 15 minutes away. They have activities there and community dinners and transportation services. Evelyn stared at her. Activities. Community dinners. The words sounded less like kindness and more like instructions for storing something old away neatly. Jason walked toward the kitchen counter and picked up a glossy brochure. Look, Mom. It really is nice. He handed it toward her. Evelyn looked down at the smiling elderly couples printed across the front beside the words Silver Oak Senior Living. Her fingers did not move to take it. Finally, Jason lowered the brochure awkwardly. We already signed some paperwork, he admitted. The realtor says the market is hot right now. If we sell before fall, we can get almost $800,000 for the house. The sentence settled over the room with brutal clarity. Not we can protect the house. Not we can help you. We can get $800,000. Evelyn slowly turned her head toward the dining room doorway where sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor. She remembered sanding those floors beside Robert one summer while Jason played with toy trucks nearby. She remembered eating canned soup for weeks after Robert lost his job because the mortgage payment came first. She remembered working double shifts at the pharmacy after his diagnosis, so Jason would never see the medical bills piling up on the kitchen counter. Every sacrifice still lived inside these walls. Yet somehow standing there now she felt like the only stranger in the room. Melissa checked her watch impatiently. The movers still need access to the upstairs closets. Jason stepped closer to his mother again, lowering his voice. Mom. Please do not make this harder than it already is. Evelyn finally looked directly into her son's eyes. The same blue eyes she used to kiss goodnight when thunderstorms scared him as a child. But the warmth she searched for was gone, replaced by calculation, exhaustion, entitlement. And in that quiet moment, Evelyn Carter understood something that shattered her far more deeply than anger ever could. Her son no longer saw her as part of the home. He saw her as an obstacle standing in the way of the life he wanted. Evelyn said nothing after that. The silence unsettled Jason more than shouting ever could have. He shifted his weight awkwardly while Melissa walked past them toward the staircase, already focused on directing the movers upstairs. Please label the nursery boxes separately, she called out. And be careful with the white crib pieces. Nursery. Evelyn repeated the word silently in her mind while staring at the empty living room around her. She should have felt anger. Most people would have. But what spread through her instead was something colder and heavier. Grief. The kind that arrived quietly after trust had already been broken beyond repair. Noah wandered toward her and gently tugged on the sleeve of her cardigan. "Grandma?" he asked softly. Evelyn looked down immediately, her expression warming despite the ache in her chest. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you sad?" The innocence in his voice nearly shattered her composure. Evelyn crouched slowly to his level and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Sometimes grown-ups make decisions too quickly," she answered carefully. Noah frowned. "But this is your house." Across the kitchen, Jason exhaled sharply. "Noah, go upstairs for a minute, buddy." The boy hesitated before obeying, clutching his dinosaur tightly as he disappeared up the staircase. Evelyn watched him go, then slowly stood again. "Even he understands," she said quietly. Jason rubbed his face with both hands. "Mom, please stop making this emotional." The sentence lingered in the air like poison. Stop making this emotional. As if 38 years of memories were nothing more than paperwork delaying a real estate deal. Evelyn turned and walked slowly toward the hallway. Her fingers brushed lightly against the wall as she passed. Tiny pencil marks still lined the trim beside the kitchen entrance. Jason's height measurements from first grade through senior year of high school. Robert refused to paint over them. "One day we will miss this," he used to say. Evelyn stopped at the final mark labeled age 18. She stared at it for several seconds while voices and footsteps echoed faintly upstairs. Then she continued toward her bedroom, or what used to be her bedroom. The door stood open. Half the furniture was already gone. Her floral bedspread had been stripped away, folded carelessly into a cardboard box near the closet. The dresser drawers sat open and empty like hollow ribs. But what caught Evelyn's attention most was the fresh pale yellow paint sample spread across one wall. Melissa had already started planning the nursery, even before Evelyn officially left. A small rocking chair catalog rested on the windowsill beside fabric samples and baby name books. Her replacement had already been chosen. Evelyn moved toward the closet slowly and noticed one remaining garment hanging alone inside. Robert's old navy cardigan. The one he wore during cold autumn mornings while drinking coffee on the porch. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. The fabric still carried the faint scent of cedar from the closet wood. And suddenly the memories came rushing back with unbearable clarity. Robert laughing while burning pancakes on Sunday mornings. Jason running barefoot through sprinklers in the backyard. Christmas lights glowing softly through snowy windows. Hospital nights. Funeral flowers. Years of sacrifice stitched quietly into every corner of this home. Evelyn lowered herself carefully onto the edge of the stripped mattress. Downstairs, movers continued walking in and out while Melissa discussed furniture placement for the baby room. Their voices drifted upward casually, almost cheerfully, as though removing her from the house was merely another home renovation project. Then Evelyn noticed something sitting partially hidden beneath the nightstand. A manila envelope. She frowned slightly and reached down to pull it free. Her name was written neatly across the front in Robert's handwriting. Evelyn's breath caught instantly. Robert Carter had been gone for almost 7 years. Slowly, carefully, she opened the envelope. Inside rested a folded letter and a business card from an attorney named Daniel Whitmore. Her heartbeat slowed as she unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. And the moment she saw the first line written by her late husband, Evelyn realized this day was about to become something her son never saw coming. The letter shook slightly in Evelyn's hands as distant footsteps continued moving through the house below her. For a moment, the noise faded into the background completely. All she could see was Robert's handwriting. Strong, careful, familiar. Her eyes moved slowly across the first sentence. "If you are reading this, then someone has tried to take from you the home we built together." Evelyn stopped breathing for a second. Outside the bedroom window, late afternoon sunlight spilled across the backyard swing Robert once built for Jason when he was 6 years old. The chain still moved gently in the breeze. Evelyn lowered herself deeper onto the mattress as she continued reading. "I know our son. He has a good heart, But sometimes weak people allow comfort to become entitlement. And entitlement makes people forget who carried them when they had nothing. Tears finally burned behind Evelyn's eyes, though none fell. Robert had always seen people clearly, even when others could not. The letter explained everything carefully. Years earlier, after his cancer diagnosis became terminal, Robert had quietly restructured all ownership documents tied to the house, investments, and savings accounts. Evelyn's name had been placed as sole controlling beneficiary over everything, including the house deed itself. Jason had never known. Neither had Melissa. Robert's final paragraph was underlined once in blue ink. If anyone ever makes you feel small in your own home, call Daniel Whitmore immediately. Promise me you will not surrender what you sacrificed your life to protect. Evelyn looked down at the attorney's business card again. Daniel Whitmore, senior estate attorney. Her fingers tightened around it slowly. Then downstairs she heard Melissa laughing. Laughing? No, the crib should go near the window, Melissa called upstairs casually. The lighting is way better there. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Her room, her window, her home, being redesigned while she still stood inside it. The ache inside her chest slowly began changing shape. Not disappearing, hardening. A knock sounded softly against the half-open bedroom door. Jason stepped inside with tense shoulders and tired eyes. Mom? He asked carefully. Evelyn folded the letter calmly before slipping it back into the envelope. Yes. Jason glanced around awkwardly at the stripped room. Melissa is stressed. The baby is coming soon. I just need you to understand we are trying to build a future here. Evelyn looked at him quietly for several seconds. A future built by removing me from my own life? Jason exhaled sharply. It is not like that. Then explain it to me. He opened his mouth but no words came. Because deep down he knew exactly what he had done. Evelyn stood slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from her cardigan. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. Did you ever ask whose name was actually on this house? Jason frowned slightly. What? Evelyn reached for her purse resting beside the closet door. I think it is time we all stop making assumptions. And for the first time since stepping out of that taxi, Jason Carter felt uncertainty creep into his chest. Jason stared at his mother as though he had suddenly realized he did not know her as well as he thought. The uncertainty in his expression deepened when Evelyn calmly walked past him toward the staircase. Downstairs, the movers continued carrying boxes through the front door, while Melissa stood near the kitchen island, reviewing paint samples on her tablet. Jason, did you tell them to leave the nursery furniture in the garage until tomorrow? She asked without looking up. Then she noticed Evelyn descending the stairs with slow, steady composure. Something about the older woman's face had changed. The grief was still there, but now it sat behind something firmer. Controlled. Melissa straightened slightly. What is going on? Jason followed a few steps behind his mother. Mom thinks. He hesitated awkwardly. She thinks the house is still legally hers. Melissa blinked once before letting out a small incredulous laugh. What? Evelyn stopped beside the dining room entrance and looked at her calmly. Not thinks. Melissa folded her arms tightly. Jason's father left this house to the family. Robert left this house to me, Evelyn answered softly. The room fell quiet except for the distant sound of tape sealing another cardboard box. Melissa looked toward Jason immediately. Tell her the realtor already verified everything. Jason's confidence had started fading. The paperwork listed me as successor beneficiary after Dad passed. Evelyn nodded slightly. Successor beneficiary does not mean owner. Melissa's face tightened instantly. Okay, hold on. We already put money into renovations. We already made plans around this. Evelyn glanced around the half-empty kitchen slowly. You made plans without asking me. Melissa took a sharp breath, clearly losing patience now. Because nobody thought this would become such a dramatic issue. Dramatic. Evelyn repeated the word silently. Her entire life reduced to an inconvenience standing in the way of someone else's plans. Noah appeared quietly near the staircase again, sensing tension despite not fully understanding it. He looked between the adults nervously. Mom, he whispered to Melissa. Are we still moving, Grandma? Melissa forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. Go upstairs, honey. But Noah stayed where he was, clutching the dinosaur tighter against his chest. Evelyn looked at her grandson gently before reaching into her purse and removing the attorney's business card. I am calling Daniel Whitmore now, she said calmly. Jason stepped forward immediately. Mom, wait. We can figure this out without lawyers. Evelyn held his gaze. You involved movers before involving a conversation. The words landed harder than shouting ever could have. Jason looked away first. Evelyn walked quietly toward the back porch door and stepped outside. Evening light stretched across the backyard in soft gold tones while cicadas hummed from nearby trees. The swing Robert built years ago creaked gently in the breeze. Evelyn stood there for a long moment before dialing the number with slightly trembling fingers. Daniel Whitmore answered on the second ring. His voice was older now, deeper than she remembered. Daniel Whitmore speaking. Evelyn swallowed softly. This is Evelyn Carter. Pause followed instantly. Mrs. Carter, he said carefully. I wondered if I would ever receive this call. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Robert left me a letter. Another pause. Then Daniel's tone changed completely. Serious. Prepared. Are you safe right now? The question startled her. Evelyn glanced back through the kitchen window where Jason and Melissa argued quietly near the counter. Yes, she answered softly. But my son is trying to sell my house. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then listen carefully. Your husband anticipated this possibility years ago. Nothing can legally happen to that property without your direct authorization. Evelyn felt her heartbeat steady for the first time all day. There is more, Daniel continued. Robert established protective clauses tied to the estate. If someone attempted to pressure you out of the home, certain financial controls activate immediately. Evelyn frowned slightly. Financial controls? Including account restrictions connected to the property trust. Inside the kitchen, Jason suddenly grabbed his phone from the counter. His expression shifted almost instantly. Confusion first, then alarm. What do you mean the transfer froze? He demanded into the phone. Melissa turned sharply toward him. What happened? Jason looked pale now. The bank blocked the down payment wire. On the back porch, Evelyn listened silently as Daniel Whitmore spoke one final sentence that changed everything. Mrs. Carter, he said calmly, your husband spent the last months of his life making sure nobody could ever erase you from your own home. Jason lowered the phone slowly from his ear while Melissa stared at him with widening eyes. What do you mean frozen? She demanded. Jason swallowed hard. The escrow account transfer failed. That does not even make sense. The bank said authorization was revoked through the estate trust. Melissa's face lost color instantly. Through the kitchen window, Evelyn remained standing quietly on the porch, listening as Daniel Whitmore explained the protections Robert had built into the estate years earlier. Your husband created what is called a protective occupancy trust, Daniel said calmly. Legally, nobody can force a sale, transfer ownership, or alter residency rights connected to that property without your written consent in person. Evelyn looked out across the backyard where the grass moved gently beneath the evening wind. Robert had known. Somehow, years before his death, he had known this day might come. There is another thing you should understand, Daniel continued. The trust includes financial oversight clauses tied to any beneficiary attempting coercion against the primary holder. Evelyn frowned softly. Coercion. Removing your belongings while you were away qualifies legally as undue pressure if done without your consent. Inside the kitchen, Melissa grabbed Jason's arm sharply. Call the realtor right now. I already tried. Then call the bank again. Jason ran both hands through his hair, panic beginning to crack through his composure. I did. They said all trust-related assets are temporarily restricted pending legal review. Melissa stepped backward slowly, staring toward the porch where Evelyn stood silhouetted against the fading sunlight. For the first time all day, real fear entered her eyes. Not guilt. Fear. Upstairs, one of the movers appeared near the staircase carrying a lamp. Where should this go now? He asked awkwardly. Nobody answered him immediately. The house had shifted. Quietly. Completely. Evelyn thanked Daniel softly before ending the call. Then she stood alone on the porch for another moment, breathing slowly. She could hear cicadas humming in the trees, smell fresh-cut grass, drifting from a nearby yard. Ordinary suburban life continuing peacefully, while her own family unraveled inside the house behind her. But something inside Evelyn had changed too. The trembling uncertainty that filled her when she first stepped out of the taxi was gone now. Robert had left her more than protection. He had left her permission. Permission to stop apologizing for taking up space in her own life. Evelyn opened the back door and stepped inside. Every conversation stopped immediately. Even the movers froze awkwardly near the hallway. Melissa crossed her arms tightly. "So what exactly are you trying to do here?" she asked, her voice strained. Evelyn looked at her calmly. "Protect my home." "Your home?" Melissa repeated sharply. "Jason is your son. And I am his mother." The room fell silent again. Jason stepped forward with visible frustration now. "Mom, nobody is trying to hurt you." Evelyn held his gaze steadily. "You packed my belongings while I was away. Because we thought this was already settled. You thought I would quietly disappear." Jason looked wounded by the sentence, but not because it was unfair. Because it was true. Noah slowly came downstairs again, sensing the tension pulling tighter between the adults. He stopped beside the staircase, watching silently. Evelyn noticed him immediately and softened her tone. "Sweetheart, can you go wait in your room for a little while?" Noah hesitated. "Are you leaving?" Evelyn's eyes glistened faintly, but her voice remained steady. "No, honey. I live here." The boy looked relieved instantly before turning back upstairs. Melissa exhaled sharply the moment he disappeared. "This is unbelievable." Evelyn looked around the kitchen slowly. Half-packed boxes lined the walls.
Cabinet d'ors tout open.
Her coffee mugs had already been wrapped in newspaper. It struck her suddenly how efficiently they had erased her. Not cruelly. Not violently. Almost worse than that. Practically. Like clearing storage space. Jason's voice lowered carefully. "Mom, if this becomes a legal issue, everybody loses." Evelyn nodded slightly. "That depends on what people were trying to gain." The sentence landed heavily. Melissa looked away first. Jason paced toward the dining room window, visibly unraveling now. "We already committed money toward the new development," he muttered. "We already signed paperwork for the nursery contractor." Evelyn listened quietly. Every sentence revealed more truth than they intended. Not once had either of them mentioned her happiness, her safety, her wishes. Only plans. Money. Space. Convenience. Melissa suddenly straightened. "Fine," she snapped. "Then let us just be honest. We cannot raise 2 children in this house while living around your routines forever." Jason closed his eyes briefly. "Melissa." But she kept going, months of hidden resentment finally spilling loose. "Everything revolves around you here. Your furniture. Your memories. Your rules. We wanted a fresh start." Evelyn absorbed the words silently. Fresh start. By removing the woman who built the home in the first place. Melissa folded her arms tighter. "You still have somewhere to go. That senior community is beautiful." Evelyn looked directly at her. "You picked a place for me before asking if I wanted to leave." Melissa said nothing. Because there was nothing left to defend. The truth now stood naked in the center of the kitchen. Jason leaned heavily against the counter. Exhaustion replacing anger. "Mom, what do you want us to do?" Evelyn studied her son carefully. The little boy she once carried through emergency rooms during asthma attacks. The teenager she worked double pharmacy shifts to put through college. The grown man standing before her now looking more frightened about frozen assets than losing his mother's trust. And somehow that realization hurt most of all. Evelyn's voice remained soft when she finally answered. "First, I want every single box brought back into this house." One of the movers immediately cleared his throat awkwardly. We can do that." Jason stared at his mother in disbelief. Melissa's mouth tightened furiously. But neither argued. Because for the first time all day, everybody in that room understood the same thing. Evelyn Carter was not the powerless old woman they assumed she would be. And Robert Carter had made certain of it long before any of them realized why. The movers began carrying the boxes back inside just after sunset. No one spoke much while they worked. Tape peeled softly. Shoes scraped against hardwood floors. Cardboard shifted through hallways that suddenly no longer felt empty. Evelyn stood quietly near the dining room, watching strangers return pieces of her life one careful trip at a time. Robert's recliner came back first. One of the movers placed it gently beside the fireplace, almost respectfully now. "Right here, ma'am?" he asked softly. Evelyn nodded once. "Thank you." The young man hesitated before speaking again. "For what it is worth." "I am sorry." Evelyn offered him a faint smile. "You were doing your job." But everyone in that house understood the deeper truth. Some people followed orders. Others created them. Jason sat alone at the kitchen counter staring at his phone while Melissa paced near the sink with tightly folded arms. Every few minutes she refreshed her banking app again, as if the frozen transfers might magically fix themselves. They never did. Upstairs, Noah quietly pushed his dinosaur across the hallway floor, while the adults downstairs struggled beneath the weight of consequences they never expected to face. Around 8:30, Daniel Whitmore arrived. His black sedan pulled into the driveway beneath the glow of the streetlights, drawing immediate attention from every neighbor still pretending not to watch through their curtains. Daniel stepped out carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a charcoal suit despite the summer heat. At nearly 70 years old, he carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades watching families destroy themselves over money and entitlement. The moment he entered the house, Jason stood quickly. "Mr. Whitmore," he said nervously. Daniel nodded politely but did not smile. "Jason." Then his attention shifted immediately toward Evelyn. "Mrs. Carter." His tone softened noticeably. "Robert asked me to look after certain matters if this day ever came." Melissa crossed her arms. "This is getting blown completely out of proportion." Daniel looked at her calmly. "Actually, Mrs. Carter, legally speaking, what happened here today was very serious." The kitchen grew still again. Daniel opened his briefcase and carefully removed several folders. "The property deed has belonged solely to Evelyn Carter since February of 2019, he explained. "In addition, all trust-controlled financial assets tied to this property remain under her exclusive authority." Jason rubbed his forehead. "Dad never told me any of this." Daniel's expression remained unreadable. "Your father loved you very much." Then he added quietly, "But he understood human nature." Melissa stepped forward sharply. "Okay, but Jason is still the beneficiary eventually." "Potentially," Daniel corrected, "provided certain behavioral conditions tied to the trust are not violated." Jason looked up immediately. "What conditions?" Daniel opened one of the folders slowly. Robert Carter included a dignity clause within the family trust. Melissa blinked in disbelief. "A what?" "A dignity clause," Daniel repeated calmly. "If any beneficiary attempts to pressure, manipulate, or displace Evelyn Carter from her residence against her wishes, their inheritance rights may be reduced or revoked entirely." The room went silent. Even the movers near the hallway stopped shifting boxes for a moment. Jason stared at the attorney as though the floor beneath him had vanished. "Dad would never do that." Daniel met his eyes steadily. "Your father did exactly that." Melissa's face flushed instantly. "This is insane." Daniel closed the folder carefully. "No, Mrs. Carter. What is insane is packing a 62-year-old widow's belongings into boxes while she is out of town and presenting her with a retirement brochure in her own kitchen." Nobody spoke after that, because there was nothing left to defend. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked softly as Noah moved around his room, unaware that his family's future was being quietly rewritten downstairs. Evelyn remained silent through most of the conversation. She simply stood beside the dining room archway with one hand resting lightly against the polished wood Robert once refinished himself during a rainy winter weekend. Daniel eventually turned toward her. "Mrs. Carter, I need to ask directly. Do you wish Jason and Melissa to remain residents of the property?" The question changed the air inside the room instantly. Jason looked toward his mother with visible fear now. Not anger. Fear. Melissa opened her mouth first. "Evelyn, let us not make emotional decisions." Emotional decisions. The irony almost hollowed the room apart. Evelyn looked slowly at her son. She saw exhaustion in his face. Embarrassment. regret trying desperately to arrive too late. But beneath all of it, she also saw something else. Assumption. Jason truly believed that eventually she would fold because she always had before. Mothers forgive. Mothers sacrifice. Mothers make room. He had built his entire life around that certainty. Evelyn's voice remained soft when she finally spoke. No, Jason's shoulders stiffened. Melissa looked stunned. Evelyn continued gently. Not tonight. A hush settled across the kitchen. You and Melissa may stay temporarily while we decide what happens next, Evelyn said. But the house remains mine. The decisions remain mine. And from this point forward, nothing changes here unless I agree to it. Daniel nodded slightly, almost approvingly. Melissa looked away immediately, unable to hide her frustration anymore. Jason lowered himself slowly back into the kitchen chair, staring down at his hands like a man seeing his life clearly for the first time. Outside, the neighborhood had gone quiet. Porch lights glowed warmly against the dark suburban street while cicadas sang through the trees. And inside the home Evelyn Carter had spent nearly 4 decades protecting, the balance of power had finally returned to the woman everyone assumed was too gentle to fight back. The next morning arrived heavy and quiet beneath a gray September sky. Rain clouds drifted low over Maplewood Drive while the house itself felt strangely still, as though every wall was listening. Evelyn woke before sunrise like she always had. For years she used those early hours to prepare school lunches, iron Jason's clothes, or drive Robert to chemotherapy appointments before work. But this morning was different. For the first time in a very long time, Evelyn Carter woke up thinking about herself. She stood alone in the kitchen wearing a soft cream cardigan while coffee brewed slowly beside the stove. The familiar smell filled the room, wrapping around memories that once felt painful but now felt grounding. Safe. Outside the window, wet leaves scattered across the backyard patio. Robert's swing moved gently in the wind. Upstairs, she heard muffled footsteps. Jason came downstairs first. He looked exhausted. His polo shirt from the previous day was wrinkled, and dark circles sat beneath his eyes. He stopped when he saw his mother calmly arranging toast onto a plate. "Morning," he said quietly. Evelyn glanced at him. "Good morning." The normalcy of her tone unsettled him more than anger would have. Jason pulled out a chair slowly. "I barely slept." Evelyn poured coffee into a mug. "Neither did I yesterday." He lowered his eyes immediately. A few moments later, Melissa entered the kitchen wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. Her expression tightened the second she saw Evelyn sitting peacefully at the head of the table again. Not displaced. Not defeated. Home. Melissa opened the refrigerator sharply and began moving things around with unnecessary force. "We need to talk about what happens next," she said coldly. Evelyn buttered her toast quietly before answering. "We already are." Jason rubbed both hands over his face. "Mom, please. Can we just figure out some compromise?" Evelyn looked at him carefully. "You mean an arrangement where I quietly accept being removed from my own home politely instead of suddenly? That is not fair. Neither was packing my bedroom while I was gone." The kitchen fell silent again. Melissa shut the refrigerator door harder than necessary. "Nobody wanted to hurt you." Evelyn lifted her eyes slowly toward her daughter-in-law. "That does not change what you were willing to do." Upstairs, Noah's small footsteps crossed the hallway ceiling overhead. The sound softened something briefly inside Evelyn's chest. Because through all of this, the one thing she refused to let become poisoned was her grandson's sense of family. Jason leaned forward heavily against the table. "Mom, I know we handled things badly." Evelyn said nothing. Jason swallowed hard. "But we really thought this house would eventually become ours anyway." There it was again. Eventually ours. Not your home. Not your life. An inheritance waiting to happen. Evelyn folded her hands calmly on the table. "Do you know what your father told me during his final week alive?" Jason looked up slowly. "He said people rarely reveal who they are during hard times. They reveal themselves when they believe something already belongs to them." Melissa scoffed softly under her breath. "So now we are villains because we wanted stability for our family?" Evelyn's voice remained steady. "No. You became selfish when you stopped seeing me as part of that family." The words settled heavily into the kitchen. Rain began tapping softly against the windows. Somewhere upstairs, Noah laughed quietly at something playing on television, completely unaware of how much truth was unfolding beneath him. Jason stared down at the wood grain of the table for several long seconds. Then finally he whispered, "I really did think you would just agree." Evelyn studied her son's face carefully. Not with hatred. That was the strange thing. Even now, after everything, she still loved him deeply. Mothers often carried love longer than dignity. That was why people sometimes mistook kindness for weakness. But Robert had seen the danger in that years ago. He knew Evelyn would continue sacrificing pieces of herself until nothing remained unless someone reminded her she mattered too. Melissa suddenly pushed away from the counter. "Fine," she snapped. "Then maybe we should just leave." Jason looked toward her immediately. "Melissa? No. I mean it." Her eyes shifted toward Evelyn. "Clearly she does not want us here." Evelyn answered softly, "I did not want to be erased." The room went completely still. Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out this time. Because no matter how frustrated she felt, even she knew the sentence was true. Jason leaned back in his chair slowly, staring at his mother like he was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Not as background support. Not as predictable forgiveness waiting endlessly in the wings. But as a person. A woman who had once worked 18-hour shifts while surviving on 4 hours of sleep so he could attend college without debt. A widow who ate canned soup for months after Robert's treatments drained their savings. A mother who quietly carried everyone else until nobody noticed the weight crushing her shoulders anymore. And somewhere between the rain against the windows and the silence hanging across that kitchen table, Jason Carter finally understood the difference between being welcomed into a home and believing you are entitled to own it. 3 weeks later, autumn finally settled over Maplewood Drive. The maple trees lining the sidewalks burned bright shades of gold and red while cold morning air drifted through the neighborhood like a quiet reminder that seasons always change, whether people are ready or not. Inside the Carter house, life had changed too. Not dramatically, quietly, permanently. Jason and Melissa had moved into a nearby rental home across town after several long conversations with Daniel Whitmore and weeks of uncomfortable silence between them and Evelyn. There had been no screaming matches. No dramatic final confrontation. Somehow the absence of shouting made everything feel even heavier. The nursery furniture never returned upstairs. Melissa stopped arguing after the inheritance documents became impossible to dispute. And Jason slowly began carrying the weight of what he had almost done. Evelyn watched it happen in small moments. The way his voice softened when speaking to her now. The way guilt entered his eyes whenever he looked at Robert's recliner beside the fireplace. The way he lingered longer during visits, as though trying to rebuild something he nearly destroyed. But trust, Evelyn learned, returned more slowly than furniture. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Noah sat cross-legged on the living room rug coloring dinosaurs while football commentary murmured softly from the television in the background. Evelyn knitted peacefully in Robert's chair, sunlight warming the hardwood floors around them. The house finally felt like home again. Noah suddenly looked up from his crayons. "Grandma." Evelyn smiled. Gently. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you still sad at Daddy?" The innocence in his voice made Evelyn pause. She set the knitting needles quietly in her lap. "I think your daddy forgot something important for a little while," she answered softly. Noah tilted his head. "What?" Evelyn looked around the room slowly. At the family photographs returned carefully to the walls. At the kitchen doorway marked with Jason's childhood height measurements. At the life she and Robert built one sacrifice at a time. He forgot that people are more important than plans. Noah seemed to think carefully about that before nodding once and returning to his coloring book. Children understood truth more easily than adults sometimes. A soft knock sounded at the front door. Jason stepped inside carrying 2 grocery bags and wearing the tired expression of a man still learning how to live with himself honestly. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. Evelyn looked up from her chair. "Hello, Jason." He placed the groceries carefully on the kitchen counter before pulling out a small paper bag separately. "I stopped by Miller's Bakery," he said awkwardly. "They still had those cinnamon rolls you like." Evelyn stared at the bag for a moment. Years ago, Jason used to bring those home every Sunday after church when Robert was too sick to leave the house. Small kindnesses. forgotten things returning slowly. "Thank you," she said softly. Jason nodded once, but his eyes remained lowered. "I know that does not fix anything." Evelyn studied her son carefully. There was no entitlement left in him now. Only humility, regret, and perhaps the beginning of wisdom. Outside, leaves drifted across the front lawn while afternoon sunlight glowed warmly through the windows Robert once installed himself during one long summer decades earlier. Evelyn finally stood and walked toward the kitchen. She reached for plates while Jason quietly unpacked groceries beside her. No dramatic speeches followed. Some wounds healed through conversations. Others healed through ordinary moments repeated consistently over time. As Noah laughed softly in the living room and the smell of fresh cinnamon filled the kitchen once again, Evelyn realized something Robert understood long before either of them did. A home is not protected by locks or legal documents alone. It survives because someone inside refuses to stop carrying love with dignity. And that day, standing in the kitchen she almost lost, Evelyn Carter no longer felt invisible. She felt remembered.